I'd like to generalize a little bit on the point about the California referendum, because I couldn't possibly care any less about marriage, but I do care about the 10th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. And in my opinion, there's nothing in the text of the 10th and 14th Amendment that contradicts each other. But there's no question that from the standpoint of a federal court, they are having battles about it all the time. Whether or not the federal courts have the authority under the so-called Equal Protection Clause to decide that state laws and state referendums are not compliant with some sort of general feeling of what equal protection means, or whether the 10th Amendment actually indicates that the federal government was never meant to police state legislation, no matter how stupid the state legislation may be.
No, that was my, I think you made my point. You made the point that I was trying to make, which was I thought it was actually the state courts that overrode that, and that that it was all the state of California as opposed to the federal government. Because if the federal government did that, then I agree with just everything you said.
So Jefferson's theory of nullification, totally valid?
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yes.
What do you think about fair tax?
Fair tax and income tax. Fair tax and I assume not income tax, but flat tax. Right? Not it. Well, it would be great to have a flat tax and do away with the IRS. Looking at the fair tax, it would be great to do away with the IRS, and if it were in fact what it's played out to be, which would be kind of a revenue neutral flat tax, that would be great also. But I would just offer caution right now today that any tax reform is really about raising taxes, and that the focus needs to be on slashing spending. Tax reform, I always found that to be, in New Mexico, I always found that to be code for raising taxes. And I would be really wary right now of a fair tax, because to me a fair tax we could just start piling these taxes. Fair tax, I think we're looking at a value-added tax, a VAT, similar to Europe in this country right now. And I think that the fair tax could be this huge VAT that comes in, and then we start piling onto the VAT on top of that. So just beware, that's all. As notions, as reform ideas, they're great ideas. They sound terrific. If we could just stop it at that. Yes?
You won twice in a state race with Democrat-Republican ratio 2-1. What do you think that was? Was Democrats voting for you, or stronger turnout by Republicans?
Well, it was probably a combination of both thereof, but I would like to think that it had to do with this notion of good stewardship of tax dollars. Just plain and simple. People saw that things were getting built, that there were always in the paper there was something that Johnson was cutting. The fact that over an 8-year period there were 1,200 fewer state employees, which had never happened before, and it really was just managing attrition, and it was a testament to state government employees. But it was always about best product, best service, lowest price. That was always the argument, and I always took it on regardless of what it applied to. It was about buying airline tickets as opposed to flying in the state aircraft because it was cheaper. It was about standing in line as governor of New Mexico, not cutting the line. Now, I did cut the line a lot because I happened to be the reason why people would have been there, and I might have come right in at the end. But I always tried to stand in line, and I think people saw that and appreciated it. And I would see it as an outsider looking into politics, and I always felt like, politicians weren't a protected class or an elevated class. They were people that were serving, and a lot of people had that. There are a lot of Mr. Smiths that have gone to Washington. A lot of them. I'd like to think I'm one of them.
Question and follow-up question. What kind of motorcycle do you have?
Right now I have a KLR 650.
Do you think there should be incentives to encourage people to commute on motorcycles rather than everybody make sure they're driving
more than that, free market. Energy prices go up and people start driving motorcycles. Energy prices go up and people start riding bicycles. And that's where I put my regulation. Government can incentivize, but why can't they just do it for everybody? Okay, policies. I signed legislation in New Mexico that gave benefit to the film industry in New Mexico. The idea was to exempt them from taxes. And it went through the legislature. I didn't promote it. It went through the legislature. And I said, when I got the bill, I said, look, I'm going to sign this bill because the bill is designed to make New Mexico Hollywood. I'm going to sign this bill, but doesn't everyone in the state see the irony here that we could be doing this for every single business in the state? And I signed it, and really, New Mexico has become the place to do to make films outside of Hollywood. But we could have done that with every single business and didn't. And I just maintain that the government does that for corporations, for big corporations. It favors monopoly. It favors the notion of corporatism as opposed to entrepreneurs, as opposed to small business, as opposed to everybody.
When you were first elected governor, did you beat an incumbent? Was there an emergency? Was there a lieutenant governor in the ballot box? And what was the nature of your campaign?
So the first campaign was that a three-term governor of New Mexico, he would have been the first two-term four-year governor because of a change in the law. I ended up to be that first 8-year governor of New Mexico. But also a big factor in my winning was just that New Mexicans didn't want him. They just didn't. And I will tell you, I ran 2 campaigns for governor where I did not mention my opponent in print, radio, or television. I did not spend 1 cent on talking about my opponent, even referring to my opponent as my opponent. And I will tell you, during my second run for governor, I ran against their strongest candidate. It was the mayor of Albuquerque. He had a 75% approval rating, and